Hello everybody, so today we are here to talk about Hinduism and our first of two Hinduism videos, so let's jump right into it. So the origins actually of the term Hinduism is very interesting. It's actually a more recent term for the collection of beliefs and philosophies of the religion that actually began on the Indian subcontinent. Typically it was kind of used by the British. Others refer to these beliefs as actually the Vedic religions. And what was really interesting is we actually don't really have a founder of this. There's no one individual that is typically credited because it's really an evolving faith over time. And there is a tremendous amount of importance on the texts, which I will talk about in this video, that really gives us the structure and details of the religion. And again, we're not exactly sure when this started. In the Indian subcontinent, as you can see here, okay, we have India here, we have Pakistan that's right over here. There was a civilization known as the Indus Valley Civilization, and that was primarily in modern-day Pakistan and a bit into India. At some point, we think around 1700 BCE or so, there was a migration of Indo-Europeans, a group from Central Asia, into this area. They referred to themselves as the Aryans, which we'll talk about at a different point. Not the same one that you think you know, completely different. And it is at this point we believe that after this development, between a combination of a religion that was brought in by the Aryans before probably 2000 BCE, and perhaps with some blending of some local religion from the Indus Valley civilization, we have the development of what would be called Hinduism. And it's the books called the Vedas, which are our oldest scriptures that we actually have in the world, that we start to get this from. And overall, because it's so old, naturally, there's a lot of followers in this religion. There's approximately 1 billion followers of Hinduism, making it the third largest religion in the world. And so today, for the rest of this video, I'm really going to focus on the texts and where we're getting our information from and how it kind of all goes together. And the oldest of the texts are the Vedas. We know that they were being written sometime between the 2nd and 3rd millennium BCE, so 3,500 to 4,000 years old. They might even be older. Well, they're definitely older as far as being passed down orally, but even, who knows, we could find some older examples of writing. Now, the word Vedas translates to knowledge. And the thing about the Vedas is, in the Hindu beliefs, it's that the idea that the Vedas have always existed. They've actually existed since the beginning of time. And eventually, these were discovered by these special sages who entered deep meditative states to discover them. And after that point, they would then start to write them down. And so again, they start to be written down somewhere between 4,000 and 3,500 years ago. There are 4 main Vedas, as you can see there, the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. And most of these are actually chants, and there's a lot of information in them, which I'll explain in a moment, but they are really meant to be chanted. And that was a great way to pass them down from masters to students before they got written down. And so what's in them? They basically contain origin stories, belief about some of the oldest gods, some of which are actually no longer even worshipped. There's some key rituals and beliefs that I'll be talking about, things like samsara and karma, as well as some creation stories along the way. Now, there is a writer that is credited to them. We do not have historical evidence of this person, but according to Hindu belief, it is Krishna Dvaipayana, or he was better known as Vyasa. He is credited with the text, and it was said that he and Ganesh, as you can see there on the right, whose god I will talk about in my next video, were the ones that created the Vedas, and then they got passed on. Now, after the Vedas, we have the next text, which are the Upanishads. And the Upanishads, in many ways, are seen as extensions or the end of the Vedas. And there's around 200. I've seen numbers from 180 to 200 total Upanishads. And again, this idea of there's an expansion in which that they look to kind of help explain and develop the Vedas. And we have that in some other religions, right? You know, if we looked at the Western religions, we have things like the Talmud that helps to explain the Torah. And other, in other religions, you have these type of texts that you kind of have the original texts, and then you have later texts that help to expand and interpret, stuff like that for a different area. These really focus on the Brahman, who is kind of the over god of Hinduism, as well as the Atman, which is the soul. And these beliefs in the Brahman, the Atman, and stuff like that are really going to help to define Hinduism, and that's what makes these particular scriptures really important. From there, we have a wonderful poem called the Mahabharata, which is actually the world's longest poem. It is an epic poem that takes about 100,000 verses. And this is the story of this ancient conflict between the Pandava brothers and their cousins. The Pandavas are, I believe, on the left, and you can see all this war and fighting and so many things that come in between here. And one of the big things that actually is discussed in this is the Hindu belief of the 4 goals of life. And it has a lot of stories about like morality and kind of some philosophical things and philosophical conundrums and how can you kind of work your way through them. So it's a really, really important thing, but it's so large that parts of it actually are kind of used separately. One example of that is the Bhagavad-Gita. And the Bhagavad-Gita is a part of the Mahabharata, and it is known as the Song of the Lord, which is a long, famous passage within the Mahabharata. And it's about Arjuna, who is the man on the right here, who is a Pandava warrior, who is distressed with the battle upcoming with the cousins. And it is here that he ends up interacting and is consoled by Krishna, who is on the left, who is an avatar of Vishnu, and I will explain what all of that means in the next video. This is a really important part of the Bhagavad Gita because we have the focus on the duties of individuals, the importance of something known as dharma, and the relationships between humans and God. And it very, very much in depth, and we really learn a lot about kind of the values of Hindus through this particular passage. Next, we have the Puranas, and the Puranas are actually the primary sources where we get the stories of the gods. You not only learn who the gods are, but you actually learn specific devotional practices to them on how you're specifically going to worship them. And what's interesting here with the Puranas definitely kind of go back pretty far because they actually discuss some of the older Vedic gods. So gods that didn't necessarily come down into Hinduism. There are some of these gods called Indra, Agni, and Surya. We're not really going to talk about them. We're going to focus on more of the other types of gods. These would be Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and we'll talk about them as well. But these are really, really important for how you need to worship and honor the gods. And then we have another wonderful epic tale, which is known as the Ramayana. And this is really interesting. Now, everything else that I've talked about up to that point is pretty much the person that is credited with writing them is Vyasa. However, with the Ramayana, this is credited to Maharishi Valmiki. And this is really interesting. It's a wonderful story of Rama and his wife Sita, along with Rama and his very close friend, the god Hanuman, who is the monkey god on the right. And they and their fight against evil demons and just evil in general. And it's really a wonderful story about like exile, abduction, and fighting evil. The importance of Rama. Rama's a really popular god. And again, it's another one of these epic tales. And one of the big things that we see throughout that Hinduism is that, yes, they have their standard religious books that might be similar to some of the things in Western religion, but when you add in these religious scriptures that are poems and chants or epic tales, it's a really interesting way to engage with the religion and to understand what the purpose of it is. And then finally, we have the Tantras, or the Tantras, I think. These books are attributed to Dattatreya, and they are full of rituals, how one is supposed to behave, and specifically regarding temples. And one of the big things that come out of the Tantras, which is very, very influential across the world today, is yoga. For those of you who do not know, yoga is actually a Hindu religious and ritual practice. It involves not only things like physical fitness and flexibility, which is really important. Taking care of your body is actually pretty important in Hinduism, and you're actually supposed to enjoy life and do things that make your body better. And yoga is one of those main ways. And yoga is also a way to meditate while doing things, which again, we will also be talking about later. And the Tantras really give us a lot of information on how that's supposed to work and all these poses and stuff like that. And so this is, kind of me setting up, kind of how the migration and the development of Hinduism, as well as now getting into some of these texts, which now that we know kind of all these different texts and where they're coming from, then we're going to be able to take that and develop a deeper understanding of how the religion functions and works, okay? So I hope you guys find this interesting, and I'll see you soon.